Hi, I'm Steve Weinberg. I'm the author of Above Quota Performance. I'd like to tell you what the best advice I ever received, which was to stay away from negative people. The negative people bring you down. And I had some really good friends that, for a long period of time, that when they woke up in the morning, the whole world was sour to them. And then they spent most of the day complaining about how everybody was out to get them. And they would bring me down. I would wake up happy and they would make me sad. And I started listening to them and wondering, why are all these bad things happening to them? And then someone mentioned to me, you really need to divest yourself of these negative people. And I did do that. And I think that was a life changing event for me. I woke up in the morning positive. I stayed positive. Uh, for a while, I felt guilty about removing them from my life, but really, right now, I'm very happy I did. It's just that every day is a good day.
Wow. So how long ago was that, Steve? Who gave you that advice?
Well, it was actually a friend of mine who went through the same thing, and I had some friends that were, and I actually say there, and I wrote a little article about that. I said they're poison, and they're like cancer, and they bring you down, and they may not intentionally want you to bring you down, but they're so embroiled in their own misery that they infect you, and it hurts. And sometimes these are family members, and in my case, I have one that's a close family member, and we just said, my wife and I just said, we don't need these people in our life anymore. We want to have a positive life, and we don't have anything to do with them.
Wow. Wow. So
So I'd
that
say that
that
was
had to have been, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
that that was the best advice I ever received. Now, before I
Yeah.
go any
That-
further, Phil, I want to say Happy Veterans Day to you because I know you're a veteran, and yesterday was Veterans Day, and it's very important to me that all veterans get recognized on Veterans Day.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Yeah. I do my best to recognize on that day as well. I think, everybody who served, well, at mill spouses, family, and the service members themselves, absolutely super, super important day. Did you serve or any family members of yours that served?
I did not. My father did during World War II, the entire duration. And right now, I have a nephew who's a pilot in the Air Force, and he's stationed in Florida. And he's been in for about 12 years, and he's going to be a career guy. So he
That's
and my
awesome.
niece have moved about 5 times in the last 6 years, and they just moved to Florida from Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh boy, that's quite a move, huh?
Well, they've been in Guam, they've been in North Dakota, Louisiana. They moved around quite a bit.
Cool. That's great. That's great. So cool. Well, I want to say congratulations on your book. It's
Thank you,
fantastic. Good job. It's a lot of work
thank
to
you.
put this together. So congratulations.
It was a labor of love. I really enjoyed it.
I bet. I bet. So I mean, you've got a long career in sales. What prompted you to finally put all your smarts down in a book?
It was interesting how it evolved. I started out in accounting, and some people wonder how can a person who's an accountant go into sales? Isn't that kind of like a personality conflict? It's almost like dual personalities. But I also explained in another article that introverts can do well in sales, although I think I'm an extrovert now. But I really relied on the expertise that I had in implementing software packages at the firm that I was with. I went to work for one of the software suppliers. They asked me to be in sales, and since I really knew their product well and I knew their competitors well, I was able to meet with people, explain how it would help them, and I could relate to them because what they were doing was the same thing I was doing just months before. So I went into sales, enjoyed it quite a bit, was promoted from individual sales into sales management. I was a VP of sales of several firms, a president of one software firm. And then about I guess about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to go back into individual sales. So I left my sales management position and went back into individual sales for about 3 years. And I loved it. I got tired of hearing everybody complain to me that they didn't have enough leads, and then, all the complaints that a sales manager receives. And I just went and did my own thing, and I did very well. I closed the largest sale in the company's history, and they changed the comp plan as a result of that, which is interesting. And I was the number one sales rep every year and the number one sales manager every year. Now, when I was a sales manager, I used to meet with the teams that I had, and I would go over something I would call the Steveisms. And the Steveisms were about 15 bulleted items with no text behind it. And then I would explain to them, I'd say, this is how I operate. This is how I want you to operate. And I would go through these Steveisms and explain to them. So here's an example. I had one that was, if you're not winning, you're losing. So people would say, well, isn't it obvious? I'd say, no, it's not very obvious, because a lot of times people would come to me and say, during an account review, I'd say, well, how are you doing on this account? Oh, well, I'm doing really well. Well, how do you know that? Well, the people are really nice to me, and they return my phone calls real promptly. When I ask them for information, they give it to me. I've had no problems with access or anything like that. I go, okay, well, that's nice. I'm glad they're nice to you, but are you winning this account? And they go, oh yeah, of course I'm winning this account. Well, tell me what steps they're taking that indicate to you that they're winning. And they couldn't give me any. I'd say, well, have they signed up for training yet? Have they put you in touch with their lawyer or the procurement person? Have they told you they made a final decision yet? Have they notified any of the other vendors that are being considered that they're no longer being considered? And have you met with the chief decision maker? And I would get blank stares. So I would look at them and say, well, if you're not getting positive feedback and you're not progressing, if you're not moving from one step to the other, then you're losing. You just don't know it yet. And the people are just being nice to you. That because they want to be nice to you. They want to treat you nice. Most people want to treat you nice. If you're nice to them, they'll be nice back to you. But that doesn't mean they're going to buy from you. So I had a number of these Steveisms, and I thought, well, after I retired from full-time sales, I would write a book. And of course, along came the pandemic, and it gave me a lot of time to do a lot of writing. And I would write a chapter on each one of those Steveisms. And that was really the genesis of the book, of what they were all about. And then I added some other things in there, like how to use LinkedIn for business development and so forth. But that was really how I got started. There were a lot of other things in there. Another thing that I guess that bothered me is that in sales, I had gone through probably somewhere between 15 and 20 different sales training courses that were put on by other people. And every one of them had some really good nuggets in it. But what I found was that when the sales trainer left, the company dropped what they were doing. The sales manager, as well as the salespeople, they didn't follow through on it. And I also found that a lot of the sales trainers were not up to date on the latest technology, such as social media. And they were telling people to do things that really I didn't think applied anymore. So I have a chapter in the book on what your sales trainer told you is wrong. And I go into detail on that. And I think that was really important for me to get that out.
Yeah, for sure. I read that chapter as a sales trainer, as someone who's doing that with great earnest, right? I was like, what's Steve got to say here? But I read that and I'm like, oh yeah, no cold calling at all, which is
right.
I mean, wouldn't that be nice, right?
Exactly. Wouldn't it be wonderful to just like live in the Garden of Eden and eat fruit off the trees? Wouldn't that be nice? But it's not realistic. And there is a very popular sales trainer right now that probably earns maybe 9 figures a year. And he says that, and he's written books And he says cold calling is, it's not good. It's not for you. Well, I think what he's saying is, it doesn't come across this way. I think what he's saying is that unsolicited calls to people without a good message and without a good reason for your call is a waste of time. And that's true. But, if you want to succeed in sales today, most companies that I've worked for and have seen from the outside, they don't give you enough leads. You need to do some business development on your own, or you'll die.
Yeah, for sure. If you're not getting enough leads, you have to take control of your own pipeline and make that happen. Totally agree. So with that, you talk about positivity, but sometimes there's too much of that, right? To your point about the leads, if I just believe that my pipeline is going to be magically good, that's not enough. So talk to me a little more about maybe how we can pull that back to make sure that we can, that we can balance the need for optimism with the need to continue to work hard and be resilient.
Well, with a lot of salespeople, what I found is that there are a lot of salespeople that are very competent, but they don't do well. And so I started thinking and of course there are a lot of incompetent ones as well, but why would a salesperson not succeed? And to me, a lot of it had to do with time management and them spending a lot of time on leads that would never ever buy under both circumstances. So, and why do they do that? Well, again, going back to what I said before, if you call somebody up on the phone and they're nice to you, you're probably going to call them back again. But there's really no compelling reason for them to buy. So salespeople need to do a better job of finding more qualified prospects. And in the book, I talk about finding them in the sweet spot. So try to find people that will buy what you're selling, that your value proposition and your product or services strengths and your competitors' weaknesses all merge into this one little area. And that's what I call the sweet spot. And you're more likely to make a sale in that area. Now, you can make sales to people that are totally outside the sweet spot. And I've done this, but your chances of doing that are much lower. So, it's, again, I talk about fishing in the right pond. I mean, you can catch a big fish. You could throw out a line without any bait in Lake Michigan, and maybe it's your lucky day and you catch a fish. But that's not going to happen unless you have the right bait and you're in the right place. And it's the same thing with sales too. So you need to have the right information, calling on the right people with a compelling value proposition, and you need to build trust with them in order for them to buy from you.
Excellent. Yeah, I totally hear that. So speaking of the right bait and the right all of that, I have to say, as you're a little more experienced sales guy than I am, you talk about LinkedIn in your book, and I'm happy to see that you talk about LinkedIn. So talk to me about LinkedIn, Stephen. Why is that some secret sauce, and how did you even get involved in LinkedIn?
Well, early on, one of my friends, Len, invited me to join LinkedIn, and I was a little worried about, what am I getting into here? What am I signing up for? But I did it based on his advice, and I started building the network. And I think what I would say is that 90% of people in business use LinkedIn for career purposes. They use it for job search and to build their resume up, and it's really more about their professional status and where they want to go and how they are. But what they're missing is that this is the best networking tool and the best way to reach prospects that I've ever seen. And if you're not taking advantage of that, and it's free for most people, and you can upgrade to premium packages, which are also very good. But there are ways that you can build your network and reach out to people, and again, contact them with positive messages, not spam, because spam from LinkedIn is equal to spam from anywhere else. So if you reach them with positive messages and you try to provide them with information that they don't ordinarily see, then they'll respond to you. More than half of them will. And my success rate, I think, in reaching out to people and reaching out to targeted people, let me emphasize that, and getting them to respond to me was much better than 50%. So it was probably in the 65, 70% area. And where else can you do that? So I would give them reasons why I think they should return my invitation, and then follow up with that with information that I provide to them to help them with their job. And then at some point, I would then contact them and say, you know, my understanding is that you run this particular area. Are you looking for something, a solution in this area that might help you out? And you know, they would say yes, no, or maybe it's, you know, another one I think that I would get a lot is it's not me. I don't do this, and that's great too, because that's actually in some ways better, because then they would say, well, I don't do that, but Sherry does that. Well, who's Sherry? Well, Sherry works in the next department. Okay, well, can you ask Sherry if she'll speak with me or converse with me or take an email? Can you do a warm introduction for me to Sherry? And 90% of the time they'll do that. I mean, I can't remember a time where they wouldn't do that. And what's better than having someone inside a company then contact the right person for you and say, this guy Steve is contacting me. I've referred him to you, and I would appreciate if you take his call. Now, what's better than that, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and it's all part of LinkedIn, and I explain in LinkedIn how it works. What's called the 7 levels of the Kevin Bacon, the networking area, and it works. I mean, for example, if I want to reach someone that you know and is one of your contacts, I'll send you a message. I'll say, Phil, I really would appreciate you connecting me with this guy Kevin that you're friends with, and I have this idea I want to run by him. Can you do that for me? And I'd say it's about a 90% success rate that'll happen, unless you become a spammer, in which case people will just not respond to you at all. They'll either ignore you or they'll disconnect from you, that's really, I can't recall that ever happening to me where anybody did that. And if somebody said to me, you know, I'm really busy now, contact me in 2 months, I didn't violate that. You know, I would set my calendar, and then 2 months later, then I would remind them that they told me to contact them in 2 months.
Yeah, well, you said a few things there that I think are super valuable, and that is, one, you targeted, right? You knew who you wanted to talk to, you knew the organization, you knew something about them, and so you sent them a targeted message. 2, you said you're not pitching them, you're not spamming them, you're not sending them garbage, you're trying to help them in their job, which is something that most people welcome, right? And then 3, you respected them. And if you put those 3 together, right, you respected their time, you respected their attention, you respected if they did say no, which wasn't often, right? I think those 3 things, Steve, are so often not done on LinkedIn. So many people, the first message they send is, hey, Steve, you want to buy a watch? It's like, come on.
Right.
Right.
And that is just awful. To me, it's like malpractice. But you have to, again, going back to what you said, most salespeople would have if you're selling a product or service, there's maybe a place where an industry or a group of companies that you want to go after. And in LinkedIn, you can follow those companies. So if you're going after technology companies, you could say, well, I want to follow Apple, and I want to follow Microsoft and IBM and whatever list of companies, Intel, so forth. And then you can check the news that they put out themselves. And anytime there's a change in, like, a new hire of a person, you'll get an alert. Now, in my case, I was following one company, and a target company that I had visited, and the person that I visited with was no longer there. So she moved on, and they hired someone else. So I got an alert that, this person had joined the company. So I reached out to him and I said, I've been in contact with your company. I met with your predecessor. I would appreciate it if you would accept my invitation to connect. And he did. And then a little while later, after sending him some information and so forth, I said, are you looking for a solution in this particular area? And he said, I am really. Right now, we're very unhappy with what we have. And so then again, another message goes back, and I said, well, are you handling that, or is someone else handling it? And he said, well, I just hired this guy last week, and he's going to be handling it. So I'm going to put you in touch with him. So he put me in touch with the guy that he hired. Now, by the way, he was a director of the company, so he was a high-level person. So he put me in charge with this guy, David, who had just joined the company. I contacted David. I said, your boss asked me to contact you, and we began discussions with him. And then about 18 months later, I signed a multi-million-dollar contract with them, and which was the largest sale in the company's history. So, it was a result of LinkedIn. So to me, when I meet with people, and I did a lot of sales coaching at my last company, they asked me to help onboard all the new people, and I would ask them, are you using LinkedIn? And they would say no. I'd say, well, why aren't you doing that? And they, gave me all kinds of various excuses, like, well, they're going to charge us one day for this. And I said, well, I heard that, I think in 2008. Okay, they were going to do that. So it's now 14 years later, and I haven't paid them a cent. So, if they do, then you can opt out. You don't have to do anything. But, when I saw salespeople, that I looked at the salespeople themselves, I looked at their profile, and I'd see they have 35 or 40 contacts or 100 contacts. I would say, well, why do you do that? Why do you have just that many contacts? Why don't you have hundreds? And they'd say, well, that I just don't have time to do that. But they have time to call on unqualified prospects. So to me, it's a no-brainer. LinkedIn is there, and most buyers, most executives around the world are on LinkedIn. And you can also find out what their receptivity is by looking and seeing how many connections they have. So, for example, if I want to approach Phil Gerbishak and I look up a profile and you have 35 connections, I'd want, well, that's not a good guy. But if it says over 500, which in your case it does, I'd say, well, here's a person that uses LinkedIn fairly regularly, and they'll probably respond. So they're actually giving you a signal before you even approach them, whether or not they'll be able to take your call or email.
Yeah. Wow. That's such simple stuff that anybody can use to be better on LinkedIn, right? See how receptive they are based on the number of connections. Or for me, I always look at activity. Are they actually alive on LinkedIn? Have they ever written a recommendation for anyone? Have they ever, done anything? Because to your point, right? I mean, why waste your time on someone who is not even available on LinkedIn or anywhere else, really?
Well, I would say, again, I mentioned earlier that, why aren't good salespeople being successful? And I think one of them is they're calling on the wrong people. And this is a case of that, where if you're spending your day just calling and calling people that'll never buy from you, it's a time waste, and that can really be the differentiator between you being 50 or 60% of quota versus being 90 or 100 or 120%.
Yeah, absolutely. So Steve, give me another Steveism. I loved your first one. If you're not winning, you're losing. Another one.
Here's another one. And this one here, when I say this to people, they just go bonkers. But this is the truth, okay? Welcome objections. Well, objections are good. And I know every sales training class that I've ever been through, we've spent anywhere from 4 hours to 3 days on training on how to neutralize objections. If they say this, you say this. If they say that, you say that, and you pivot here or you go here. And I got to thinking, well, you know what? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If someone says to me, your price is too high, or I don't like the availability when you're going to be able to send me the product, or I don't like the color. I mean, this is really good information. Why don't I want this? And why do I want to fight this? And why do I want to try to neutralize it? And why do I want to insult the person who gives me this information? Why do I want to tell her, no, you're wrong. Our price is really good. Okay. You may think it's high, but it really isn't high. Okay. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, how do I move the sale forward by slaying the dragons, let's say, and fighting them off? So in my case, what I noticed early on is that I wanted an objection. So even if they were quiet and they didn't give me any, I would say, well, okay, well, I've explained the product to you. Is there any reason why you wouldn't buy it? Or can you see any reason why it doesn't fit in this environment? Or is there something about it that bothers you? Or anything about our company that bothers you? Or anything about me that bothers you? You know, solicit this information. And then once you get that information, don't be defensive. Don't say, well, you're wrong, Mr. Prospect. You've got this all wrong. I'm really, really a nice guy and the product is really good. And you're just too stupid to understand that. Okay. I mean, isn't that a very insulting message back to them? So I would say, okay. Instead, I would say, okay, I understand what you're saying. Okay, let's work with that now. How do I get you to understand, or how do I change your mind in this area? What can I do to prove to you that this product really is a great value, that it really does fit into your company well? And maybe I did just a really crummy job of explaining it to you. And maybe I need to work on my explanation a little bit better, because obviously it's not resonating with you. So I own it. I own the problem of whether or not they see value in what I have, not them. So again, objections are good. It's really good. It's like, why am I not winning? Okay, well, here are the 3 reasons why you're not winning, and they tell you. And again, and a lot of times they don't tell you because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they just want to be. They think they are fairer to everybody if they give out no information to each particular one. So they want to treat everybody the same by limiting the amount of information. Well, it's your job as a salesperson to pull that out of the information, to pull the information out of them, and to do it in a non-offensive way, in a non-insulting way. So all these different closes and different ways of fighting off objections, which I call objection jujitsu. They're I think they belong in history. This is from the 1970s and 1980s and earlier maybe, but in the 2020s, it's not the way to operate anymore.
So we're not going to close here with the Ben Franklin close or the doorknob close or the sell me a pen close. Come on now, Steve. Those are great. No, those are terrible. I'm with you. Yeah, they belong in a history book in the museum. Right. They don't belong in 2022 at all. I totally agree with you.
They worked for your Uncle Frank, but they don't work now. Okay.
I love
they
that.
They work for the door-to-door floor brushman and the encyclopedia salesperson and maybe the used car salesperson. But I mean, who likes to be insulted like that? Who likes to be told that what they're thinking is wrong? Because what they're thinking is what they're thinking. And if they're willing to tell you that information, why would you not want to have that information?
Absolutely.
And maybe, by the way, maybe there is no way for you to provide a solution to them. Okay. If after they tell you that, you think about it and you say, well, I can't really solve what their objection is. Well, that's also good information. Then you say, thank you very much for considering me, and then you go on to the next sale. And you don't waste any more time, because if you can't resolve it, they've actually saved you time and they've done you a favor.
Yeah. No is the second best answer we can get, right? Knowing that there's no solution. We're done.
Exactly. I mean, there are times where that's the case. And in one case, I had a prospect in Chicago, and I called on this particular person, and very nice man, and he told me what the objection was, and I thought about it, and I called him back the next day, and I said, you know what, we're not the product for you. It's just not a good fit. And he said, well, why isn't it a good fit? And I said, well, what we have doesn't run on the database management system that you have, the one your company has decided. And he asked me for more information, and I gave it to him. And then he said, well, will you meet with our information technology people? And I said, sure. And I met with them, and it turned out they changed the system that they worked on, and then they bought my product. And that's the honest to God truth. And he's still a good friend of mine till today.
Yeah.
I
well,
still
sometimes the answer is not you, right? Not for
right.
now, anyway, huh?
Be honest with them, and maybe sometimes you're not the good fit, and that's okay. Because if you tell them that, then one day you will get a sale. But if you do make a sale to them and they're unhappy, you will never get a sale from them at this company and the next company and the next company after that. You just won't.
So true. So true. Wow. Steve, so much more we could talk about in your wonderful book. Again, congrats on Above Quota Performance. If there's one way that people can get started on the path of going above quota performance and really outkicking where they are, what would that be?
Well, they can go to my website, which is www.steveweinbergsales.com. That's STEVE. Weinberg is WEINBERG. Steve Weinberg Sales is one word.com. And I have on there a lot of resources, some of the places where I've spoken, and some of the articles that I published, which are about 50 or so far. They can read that. They can also contact me through there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, such great stuff, Steve. Again, congratulations on the book. Friends, if you're listening, you're watching, you bet. Get a copy of Above Quota Performance. It's filled with great stuff. Lots of Steve isms in here. Lots of sales truth from an experienced, intelligent, helpful sales guy. Steve, thank you so much for spending time with me today and for sharing some of your great insight. I so appreciate you.
You're welcome, Phil. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And folks, go to steveweinbergsales.com and get to know my friend Steve Weinberg. Have a great day. Now go above quota performance.